On+Giants. Mounds, monsters, myth and man, or Why We Want to Be Small, by Brad+Lockwood.
Copyright 2010, Brad+Lockwood, all rights reserved.
4-foot wide moat, 4 feet deep, and an impenetrable upper inside wall another 4 feet higher. Approach and assault, fall into this ditch and face an 8-foot tall enclosure, imprisonment or instant death. Do you know where you found the post holes? I asked Dave, raking the ground along the inner rim with my fingers, further eroding inches of decomposing leaves and worms before striking soil.
All around the outside of the fort, along here.
He details, rubbing along the rim now too, seeking depressions.
Inside the trench, inside the wall.
These were fine constructs, forts indeed. Only 2 entrances, east and west. 8-foot high trench and embankment surrounding, encompassing, with hundreds of limbs and posts added inside, anchored deep, standing skyward. Digs at similar fort sites have shown some posts the size of telephone poles.
Footnote.
From page 54 of Indian, Mounds of the Middle Ohio Valley by Susan L. Woodward and Jerry L. McDonnell, the McDonnell and Woodward Publishing Company, Blacksburg, Virginia, 2002. Though self-published, their work is well-researched and documented, more of a fine tourist guide than scientific study. Note, the authors were married, now divorced, and follow-up with Susan L. Woodward shows how strained personal relations can also undermine the long-term impact of collaborations. She no longer advances, or at least personally supports, some of the theories put forth by her co-author and former husband. Attempts to contact him were unsuccessful. One example is found on page 53, and I quote, "In addition to providing a center for mortuary functions, these special sites also could have been the central place where a region's calendric lore was maintained and monitored," end quote. A calendar or any astronomical connections between these earthworks remain unfounded and are solely speculative. A circle of post will point to any star or equinox the eager eye seeks.
The inhabitants here were as secure as any Roman outpost. At the same time, see any springs?
No.
That's peculiar. Why build a sturdy fort expecting attack or siege without access to fresh water? This fort is unusual, on a plateau overlooking my valley and maybe one other, yet still too remote. Moreover, why attack such a place? Could the gain outweigh the losses in assault? Maybe a temporary or fallback fort. Eerily, the sole goal of this locale seems surveillance. By now, Dave's gotten more comfortable with us and confides that he has brought his metal detector up here before, mostly looking for old traps. He says he collects them, and I don't doubt him, but he knows this ground well, all 99 yards in diameter, around the trench rim and gates. He's gone over this fort more than once.
There's an old stove up here,
he mentions, excusing or explaining, approaching the eastern edge. Phoebe and I remain distant, inspecting eroded walls in the semi-filled trench, me measuring, her seeking evidence. Stalwart Stewart stands too near as Dave lifts a cast-iron stovetop and shakes off years of organic growth. Wiser now, Stu ducks away with a wag.
Here it is.
We gather, hover, more interested than if we'd found an arrowhead. This stove dumped out here decades back, Dave thought it was from a hunting cabin, is our reward. I kneel to see the body of the stove sinking, being devoured by the ground and digested. At least 1 foot deep already and only a few decades old. This makes me wonder if the trench was deeper. 5 feet up and down, maybe 30 feet total height with posts. Still, we're more captivated and connected to that stove, a recent rusting relic, than whomever may have built and inhabited this place however long ago.
This stove throws off all readings, metal everywhere up here. I hear there's a new model that you can see what's beneath without having to dig.
Like on an LED display, I wonder, imagining all I could find up here, given more time, bug repellent, and better technologies. Maybe a real team, archaeologists, anthropologists, an ethnologist, and a historian. Puppies. Dave nods. Then, and I don't know if the others remember this, but we seem to stop and look around all at once. Take a good long look at last. For an instant we ingested this place. Stuart too, floppy ears firm, snout sniffing the sky. This part of the forest is quiet and the spot is clear. Nothing grows here for long or tall. Standing off center of this ancient fort, silent and still, only then did it actually exist.
I found some bolts up here, too. Maybe from the French.
Considering this, thinking smelting and forging what else these forgotten people were capable of, I watch as Stuart exits the fort, using the gate no less, finding a distant cherry tree and lifting a leg. And I realize then that they were once here, as are we, and soon, aghast, loggers. And they too will realize that nothing's here. How couldn't they? Once found, it's impossible to miss. A circular clearing in the woods, defended no more, no straight cherry within, nor, in a few years, cast iron stove. Seeing this absence, maybe then they'll go elsewhere and leave this spot alone. Like we did. Don't ask me to tell you where it is. All I can say is you'll know you're here, and that it isn't the work of the French or us. Seneca, not likely. It's too old and not their style. The lost tribe I've come to find, perhaps? Giants? Dave knows other sites, too. He won't show us, though, and instead teases, mentioning a Hopewell mound nearby and burial sites, one he says he found while watching a deer. Taking a step higher, staring at whitetails until realizing he was on neatly stacked rocks, that's how he found that other burial site. And inside, as deep as he dared dig his hand, signs of fire, a tomb sealed with flames. He mentioned both earlier over the phone, but remains guarded for obvious reasons. This fort will have to satisfy for now. I have heard and read all the stories and reports, studied sketches and made maps. I even met a man who once fled a monstrous being along that Allegheny hilltop on his ATV, that hungry giant striding alongside at almost 40 miles per hour. Now I'm here to see for myself. Dave has been a fine guide, a true woodsman, but this expedition has offered few explanations. Who was that mighty wall meant to repel? Where's the water? Later, leaving, I look back up to that forgotten fort, the hill slope affording invisibility again, and then, innately, I feel the need to attack. Without hesitation, charge it. Fast and furious, assail the high fort overlooking my hometown. The slope is gentle, cresting, feeling steeper downhill than up. An army of dozens could overrun that fort, 20-foot-high dirt and wood wall or none. I long to lay siege here, send waves of warriors. The others obviously don't share my urge and are already entering the knee-high pine below. But I can't fight it, see it. Giants bent low, ancestral enemies quiet in approach, legs speeding, sidestepping trees and scaling the hill, overseeing my hometown, attacking the center of this ancient county, unleashing Armageddon. A sound brings me back. Distracted, an unwelcome return to reality. I turn to see Stuart barking, lapping a clear and crisp puddle. My first inclination is to yell at him. He's already in need of a bath, never mind a visit to the vet. And then it hits me. Those horseshoe tracks were muddy. A spring does run, downhill from our fort at least 100 yards, fresh and frequent. That spring still quenches.
Coming up next.
On Giants!
The recent finds on Flores and in the Republic of Georgia and on the Rock of Gibraltar have both invalidated and created decades of scientific work. And this presents us with a prodigious moment. Time for a blank slate, an entirely new look at who we are and where we come from. Creationists should restrain their enthusiasm, though.